Shalom. This is a quick update on a video I made a couple of months ago. Of course, giving all praises to Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushua. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone, to my elders, my bishops, Akim and Akwab. Salutations and blessings to the house of David, of course. Let's just get into it real quick. Let's just get into it, man. So, you wonder why it's going to get bad? You wonder why it's going to get worse? They tripling the poison, man. See the one all the way in the back? 1, 2, 3. You wondering how it's going to get bad? Damn. All right, maybe when I made the video, I didn't realize, but these here, I don't know if you can see them, but these things here are planes, and there's one all the way back here. I can't even see it on the video, but I remember it while I was taking it. Okay, so as you know, these are chemical trails, and I ain't gonna speak too much about it because this video will tell you a mouthful. So stay and watch the video, man.
Perlin Jerry is the author of The Uterine Crisis, one of the first books to link environmental toxins with the staggering rate of women's reproductive illnesses.
What I'd like to focus on today in my talk is how weather modification, which was mentioned just briefly in a question, is playing a major role in this rapidity of environmental changes, but also in the vast increases of illness. So let me set the stage with some background. I spent 15 years of independent research for my last book, which is called The Uterine Crisis. It is one of the first books to link the huge environmental crises that we have, multi-layered that they are, with women's reproductive problems. And they are staggering from fetuses in utero all the way to elder women. Though I haven't done the research for you guys, you're not off the hook by any means, because sperm count is down by 50%. It's because sperm count is down by 50% with all the toxins in the environment. But what I learned with this research is, and it's a staggering figure, if you can even get your mind around it, is that we are exposed on a regular basis to 100,000 chemicals every single day. It depends on the spew, where you are, and I do mean a spew because it's a toxic spew. And most of these have never been tested for human safety. We're the guinea pigs for an experiment that is way out of control. And this is one of the reasons that we have high rates of cancer, although right now cancer is number 2, superseded by heart cardiovascular problems, which is now number 1, and asthma, which I will mention later, is number 3. In addition, there are 8,000 new chemicals that go online every year to which we're also exposed. 8,000. These two have never been tested for human safety. Chemicals and pharmaceuticals are tested one at a time, and because the way things are right now, there are very few independent labs and few independent scientists. So a lot of this is, as I say, the fox is guarding a scenario that's really pretty awful. And we have known really since the 30s, particularly for issues surrounding women's reproductive problems, that tampons were unsafe in the 30s, but a lot of things are covered up, and that has not changed in 70 years. So having the pharmaceutical companies...
She said tampons. Just imagine what they do with a paper toilet.
Test things, or the chemical companies test things, doesn't necessarily mean that we're safe if something's put online. In addition, these safety factors that the chemical and the pharmaceutical companies test for, they're testing one chemical at a time. This does not address what Dr. Theo Colburn in Our Stolen Future in 1996 addressed, and that is it's multiple. And one chemical plus one chemical does not equal two. One chemical plus one chemical could equal, especially in hormone disrupting chemicals, 1,600 times the dose. And we're all walking time bombs. That is a reality. Everybody in this room. Bill Moyers did a great show about 6 years ago called Trade Secrets, which...
Sorry to interrupt, but I heard a Chinese woman say, America has always lied because 1 plus 1 does not equal 2. 1 plus 1 equals a greater 1. Think about it.
Which is still available, I believe, on DVD, looking at this whole issue of the multiplicity of chemicals and the problems that, I should say, of greed have caused for Americans. And as I write in The Uterine Crisis, it's all about greed. It's not about our well-being and safety. And there are countless stories about the problems of people who have become critically ill or died, stories going back to the thalidomide crisis in the 60s and 70s, toxic shock syndrome, pesticide poisonings, which are really off the scale, even for small children, and Vioxx, just to name a few. It was on the market when they knew it was unsafe, and people were spending a fortune so that the companies could make billions of dollars. We are the guinea pigs in a huge and complex experiment where the health and environmental repercussions are absolutely staggering. Babies are now born with what is called the body burden. That is, while they're growing in utero in their mom's bodies, they are already getting a chemical body burden that is passed on through the umbilical cord. And so by birth, these poor, innocent children are already affected. And there are staggering rates of birth deformities, cancers, and other reproductive-related illnesses that we did not have 20 or 30 years ago. When I was growing up, there was no such a thing as a children's hospital. Think about it. We have children's hospitals all over. What has happened? What has happened? Just think about that figure. What does 100,000 chemicals mean in a mixture that is not even being tested in its vast mathematical complicity? We breathe chemicals every day. We eat food grown in heavily pesticided soil that's greatly reduced in beneficial organisms and mineral content from 30 and 40 years ago. We drink water that is highly contaminated with other chemicals, including mercury, as Pat mentioned, and every other kind of spew that you can even imagine. Americans are exposed to many higher levels of toxins, including mercury, from power plant emissions, as Pat had mentioned, from cement factories, and from multi-prepared vaccinations, the latter of which has resulted in autism, high rates of autism, ADD, and other cognitive troubles. For centuries, we've known that mercury, probably thousands of years, that mercury is deadly. There is no safe level of mercury, not at all. The Mad Hatter of Alice in Wonderland is based on the 17th and 18th century real Mad Hatters who died and went crazy before they did because of the use of mercury in making those tall hats that we see in historical paintings. There's no safe level, as I mentioned, of mercury. It takes decades to work its deadly action, and in a person's later years, brain function and cognition deteriorate and death ensues. I've seen it with my own mother, who was one of the leading dentists in the United States for 47 years. I've seen it with friends, and it's a pretty awful scenario to see somebody who was brilliant not even be able to communicate. Mercury is unsafe, and we are breathing it as we speak. Thirdly, in regard to climate change, there has been new research from several scientists just in this past year showing dwindling to no sunspot activity from our sun. The science is not perfect. We've heard from people earlier today saying it's a consensus and everything's always up for re-examination. But this lack of sunspot activity could indicate from several scientists. If you need the websites and the particular references, I'll be glad to give them to you after my talk. This might be indicating that we're entering what is known as a Maunder minimum that is similar to the ice age that was mentioned earlier during the 17th century. This may indicate that, in fact, maybe the climate is not getting warmer, but much cooler. We just don't know. This is all up for changes. I will say, living in Maine and having just moved from California, and that's another story, Maine,
Didn't Biden mention something about cold winter?
Past winter had 16 feet of snow. It's the highest, most significant snow level that we've had since records began to be kept during the 1870s. Of April this year, there are more than 150 different weather modification programs around. In addition, the Pentagon is on record this summer as saying it wants to resume open-air testing of biologic weapons. There's a flyer outside on this with some research programs around. In addition, the Pentagon is on record this summer as saying it wants to resume open-air testing of biologic weapons. There's a flyer outside on this with different weather modification programs around. In addition, the Pentagon is on record this summer as saying it wants to resume open-air testing of biologic weapons. There's a flyer outside on this with some research that Professor Francis Boyle has done. And he's been quoted recently as saying the Pentagon is fully prepared to launch biological warfare by means of anthrax. All the equipment has been acquired and all the training conducted, and most combat-ready members of the U.S. Armed Forces has been given protective equipment and vaccine. Do you know that as of October 1st, how many of you know that we are on an anthrax alert that was issued by the Secretary of Health and Human Services? October 1st, how many of you know that we are on an anthrax alert that was issued by the Secretary of Health and Human Services? You know that as of October 1st, how many of you know that we are on an anthrax alert that was issued by the Secretary of Health and Human Services? Anybody know? One person, two people, three people.
I think we have to move along to lunch, Julia.
So I would like to say that we don't have Star Trek technology. It's just a Hollywood fantasy. Yet much of this technology is being used on us without our permission. We are signatories to no germ warfare and to the Nuremberg trials. This is our home. This is our home. Earth is our home. We don't have Star Trek technology to go to another planet. We have consequences that are moral and ethical in their ramifications, and we don't need to have any more toxins.
Shalom. Stay watch.